Hi, I'm Brandon.
And I'm Megan.
For years, we were stuck in a rut, always complaining that nothing ever changed for us.
And then we realized if we wanted to improve our lives, we had to put in the work.
Each week on this podcast, we'll get into an aspect of personal growth, relationships, or just life.
Through our own experiences and guest interviews, we hope to inspire you to make your own positive changes.
Welcome to the Fools in Love podcast.
Hey guys, this week we are talking about how to move to a new city. We know that it is not an easy task, and we also have had a few people say, hey, you guys have done this a few times, so today we wanted to just chat about that.
That's right. We have actually moved 2 different times in actually a really short amount of time, and we do get that a lot where people just want to know, like, what is it like? What was the thought going into that? And what was the transition like? And what did that all entail? So we figured, hey, why not do an episode about it?
So first up, we wanted to just talk about just the decision process. So how we decided and how you should decide and just kind of go through that. So I think first of all for us was kind of like the fresh start perspective. Like we got married in 2008 and we were in this place where we didn't really have any next step, any next logical step. We were in an economy that wasn't great. We didn't really know what our career paths were. Brandon was trying to be a teacher, but who knew how that was going to play out for him in the job search area. So we decided to take a leap of faith right after we got married.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, we just looked at the landscape, looked at the situation we were in. As Meg said, we were in a place where we didn't really know. And the job market where we were was terrible. There was just no one offering jobs. There was no new jobs. A lot of the area we were in was kind of, things were closing, not like rejuvenating and growing. And it was kind of to a place where we were like, what are we going to do? If we stay here, will we be living in our parents' basement?
And we kind of felt like, yeah, we would be.
Right. And maybe you're coming from a place where it's not that, like where you're not just starting out, and maybe you've had opportunity for a new job. Maybe there's opportunities somewhere else, or maybe you just want to look at something new. And maybe you're in a situation where the people or whoever you're around physically is a reason to move. And so those are all considerations, but we want to get into all of what that entails.
Yeah. So like Brandon was saying, do you need a fresh start in that the people or the situations that you're in just aren't good for you anymore? And really the only way you can remove yourself from that is to actually move away from that. Another thing is just, are you bored with where you are? Do you feel a calling in your life? Do you feel that pull to go explore something new?
Right. Yeah. And in my experience, the thing is, but until you go out there and see the world and get out of your comfort zone and where you're at and where you've been, like before we moved, we were in the same place for 20 plus years. So I never really knew the world. We never really traveled. Our family never really went out and saw anything. So like for me to go out into a whole new place, like naturally, obviously, you're going to experience so many new things, new groups of people, new cultures, all kinds of stuff that I just never got to experience before. And a lot of times that can be a motivator to look at someplace new.
Yeah, and in full and fair disclosure, I was the one, I think both moves, pushing for us to do that move. So our first move was from the Flint, Michigan area to the Fort Worth, Texas area. And then second time around was from the Fort Worth area to Raleigh, North Carolina, where we currently are. And I think that, I was ready for that new perspective and those new opportunities, but maybe you weren't so much.
No, I definitely wasn't ready. And I'll be the first to admit, I dragged my feet. Meg would say the things that we're talking about right now. Like, what are we going to do if we stay here? Where are we going to be? What's our future look like? And I was like, I don't care. Like, I'm from a small town. I've always been from a small town. I don't want to move. It's scary. Like, I can admit it now. Back then, I probably wouldn't have said it, but it's really scary to go to a new place. And there's a lot of fear of the unknown. Mm-hmm. And I just wasn't ready to leave because we were leaving everything we'd ever known. We were leaving our family and friends. We were leaving that comfort of knowing where everything is, because that's another thing when you move. You don't know where anything is. And Meg kind of dragged me kicking and screaming both times, and I just wasn't ready to do it. But thankfully, she was the one who kind of pushed the next foot forward, and she's cute enough that she can get away with that.
Hashtag mean wife. So another thing that you should probably be considering when you're deciding to move or not is just the financial aspect of everything. Where you are versus where you're going, how is that going to differ financially, and can you make it in the new place?
Right, and that's a pretty important thing when you're looking to move, because it's not only got to be something that you want to do or are motivated to do, but it's got to make sense financially, right? Because if you go and you don't want to go move yourself thousands of miles like we've done in the past, get there and figure out that you can't make it there. Like, if you're going to a huge city, can you afford that city? If you're going to a place, can you even do that? And another thing with that too is just geographically, like the location you're going, does it make sense for what you're trying to do? Few examples I can think of is here in the Raleigh-Durham area, or the RTP, the Research Triangle Park. It's all about medical, for example. And so if you're in medicine, then yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Or for example, maybe LA for an actor or producer, or maybe Silicon Valley if you're looking to be in technology. And yeah, there's little niches of that market everywhere, but you want to make sure that what you're trying to do makes sense there.
Right, exactly. Is that possible? Can I go be what I want to be where I'm planning to go?
Yeah, like for example, if you're originally from Michigan like we were and you own a snow plowing business, probably not the best business to have down here in North Carolina.
Right. And then another thing that we had to think long and hard about is where do our friends and family live? So I was definitely ready to be moving, but I wasn't totally okay with just moving to no one. So the first time, like I said, we moved to Texas, and Brandon's brother and sister-in-law actually lived in Texas, which is why we chose to head that way first. We just wanted some comfort, some familiarity, some sort of comfort there. And I think that was a super great strategy for planning our first move away from home.
Yeah, the other thing I can think about is just how does that decision affect your loved ones? We talked about Meg dragging me, but how did that decision affect our relationship? How was that decision going to affect it? A lot of times you don't even know, because if you've never moved before, you have no idea the ramifications or the effects of being in a new place. It's going to add new stresses. Even if you're motivated to move and you're starting a new job and you're starting something you really want to do, there's going to be stresses that come along. Another question, we did this pre-kids, but if you have kids, how's that going to affect your kids? How's that going to affect them for changing schools? How's that going to affect them with their current friends or where they're at in their stage of life? And I'm not saying that makes your decision for you, but it's things you got to take into account before you're making that decision or during that decision-making process.
Exactly. And, not everyone is going to be super pumped that you made this decision. I don't think our parents were like clapping their hands as we pulled the moving truck away. I don't believe that they were all completely on board with our move, but we knew deep down that we had to make that move. And whether they were, 90% on board or 20% on board didn't really matter, because we had evaluated everything for us and knew that was the direction to go.
Right. And we say this all the time, but ultimately you got to make the best decision for you and the best decision for your family. And Meg's right. Not everyone's going to agree, because it's much like everything else. Not everyone's going to agree with what you want to do. But with your making that decision to move, you got to do what's best for you, because ultimately you're the one that's going to be there. You're the one who's going to be having to experience it, and you're the one who's going to be taking on the challenges of that. So you have to make it right with you.
So now you've made your decision. You're moving. So obviously, like we said, the first time for us was basically financial. There weren't really any jobs for us in Michigan, and we decided, hey, we're moving. But once you've made that decision, there's a few things now you have to think about. And one of those is timing. And I would say there is probably never going to be a perfect time to move, but is there a better time to move?
Right. That's totally right. And it's one of those things where it's like, with your job, like how long have you been there? Is it a good time to transition? Like, seasonally, is it a good time to transition, to try to get a place to live, to try to get a new job? Just in your life, do you have 1,000 other things going on at the moment that may be pulling yourself up and uprooting yourself with all those other stresses going on? Is it really the best time to go and move across the country or even move a few hours away?
That's such a good point, because we often don't even remember to just take an assessment of where we're at, like our mental status, our job status, everything else, how our family is looking right now. But like you said, there has to be that evaluation of how that timing is going to play out.
Yeah, I have to totally agree with you, though, because I don't believe, much like anything else, that there's a perfect time. I frankly don't believe there's a perfect time for anything, ever. Because the honest truth is, you don't know what you're taking on. And when you're moving, if you're getting married, if you're starting a new job, you never really know the stresses of that, the excitements of that, what's going to come when you're doing those things. And so I don't believe there's ever really a perfect time. And sometimes you just have to make the decision to do it.
Amen to that.
One of the things for us, too, is when we were kind of making that decision of where to move, and I know Meg said this a little bit before, but do you have anyone there? Do you have feet on the ground wherever you're going with a support system that can help you during the transition? Because when you're initially moving, it's very hard no matter what. But if you have no one there who knows the area, who knows where to go for certain things, who knows and can be kind of a springboard to help you along when you first get there during that transition, it always makes it a little bit easier. Like for us both times, like Meg was saying, when we moved to Texas, my brother and sister-in-law were already there and had been there for several years. So when we first moved there, when we pulled up, we unpacked our stuff in their garage, as I recall. Mm-hmm. And we had a month or two to stay at their house rent-free and get our feet on the ground, try to secure jobs, and try to have everything in place. And that was a huge benefit to us.
Right. I was going to say, as you were talking about the support system, that we actually used them for more than support. We actually lived them for living arrangements too. So that's an important consideration. Like if you have someone who would take you in for even a couple weeks just to do that, initial apartment or home search.
Right. Because I remember when we first moved to Texas, we didn't know where to live. We didn't know the area. We didn't really know where we would be working. So without being there physically, it was really difficult to determine what to do. And having those people there where we could stay even for a short time just allowed us to kind of get our bearings, figure out where we needed to go in the area, where we wanted to be, and make a decision from there.
Absolutely. And then I did want to touch on jobs too, because there's a lot of debate about, can you move without a job? Should you move without a job? Or do you always have to have the job already lined up? Those kind of questions. And I think it's an important consideration, but I don't know that there's a right answer on this one either. So if you already have a job lined up, then that's awesome. And if you don't, you have to think to yourself, am I willing to work at just any old job while I search for my dream job or a better job? Because those bills are going to start coming in hot and you're going to need to make a plan for that. What if your job doesn't happen right away? What if you move without one and you don't have the perfect job? Can you make it work at McDonald's or any sort of just, job that's a little bit easier to get? Not that there's any sort of right or wrong job, but just one that you can get a little bit easier.
As you're talking, I just remember my time working at odd jobs when we first moved. Like when we moved to Texas, I couldn't secure a job right away. I was at a gym. I mean, I was just working part-time at a gym, and I was also working part-time at an after-school program. And then when we moved to Raleigh, I was working at Borders, RIP Borders, but I was working at Borders. Yeah. And I just had to be okay with that. And like Meg said, again, I don't even know, because I had that experience, that I would say, well, I would have rather just waited to move, because I feel like it's really difficult a lot of the time to get a job if you don't have feet on the ground.
Right.
Like you can't come in and interview with someone and they see that you're across the country. How committed are you to them that you're going to be in that area? And they don't want to hire someone, go through a hiring and training process, and then have you decide, you know what, I don't want to move. But if you've already made that commitment and you're already there, well, that opens the door that you're pretty serious about being in the area.
Right. That physical address means everything. I mean, just as somebody who's hired people, a lot of times we don't look at the out of state people because it just feels like too much effort and too much uncertainty.
Yeah, and to be honest, we've hired people in the past that just decided not to come.
Yeah, burned.
And we got burned. And so for that experience, yeah, I really it's like, what is the commitment level? And how, if you're committed, how committed is your family to moving? Because it's a whole experience. I know when we were growing up, we almost moved. My family almost moved. And guess what? We decided not to because half of us voted to go and half of us voted not to go. And guess what? We didn't go. And so it's like, it's all of that. There's so many considerations when you're looking at it. And that leads us right into the next one, which is just having that support system. Because if no one's in the area where you're going to be going, who are you going to lean on when the times are tough? Like, you might have people locally now, if you are in the place where you grew up, or you just have made friends in a new place to where you live now, who support you, who lift you up. Are they going to be available via phone or email, or how are you going to sustain yourself once you get out there, get into a new place, and things start going bad, or even if things are going well? Who are you going to talk to, and who's going to carry you through day by day?
But guys, we are not in any way saying that you can't move without a support system in the new location. That is not what we're saying at all. You can absolutely move to a place where you know no one and have it work. We see it all the time because there is no reason that you have to stay just because somebody is there for you versus not. You can always venture out and it can be a success.
Yeah, that's totally right. And in most cases, we had like one group of people that were there on the ground in order to do that. It's just something that's a consideration because when you're looking at a new place, I'm speaking from experience here. If you're listening to this and you've never done it before, it's going to be harder than you think. Like Meg said, I'm not trying to discourage anyone. I think moving was one of the best decisions we ever made. But I do want you to understand that it's going to be more difficult than you can imagine. It's way more challenging than you're ever going to think, and until you do it, you really don't know the ramifications of it. Again, it was the greatest thing we've ever done, but it was also one of the hardest things we've ever done.
Oh, yeah, to say there's a learning curve is almost an understatement. I mean, we just really weren't prepared for all the learning and growing we were going to need to do when we moved. And like Brandon said, it was great for us. It didn't feel great in the moment. I'll tell you that. It felt really, really hard and uncomfortable and icky and like, what are we even doing? And why did we do this? But eventually we saw the light and we realized this is so much growth for us as a couple, so much growth for our family that would eventually develop, and it just felt worth it.
Right. Yeah, we touched on this a little bit before too, but I think cost seems like one of the most logical places to go. And when you're looking at a new place, you have to think about how expensive is it? Because not only is it expensive to move in the first place, but what about the place you're going? Is the cost of living going to be higher? Are you moving to a city versus some rural area? And if that's the case, will you be able to afford a place? Will you need to find a roommate? What are the stresses going to be of having a roommate, especially if you've never had a roommate? Will it work ultimately for your budget? Because I think a lot of times in our heads, we look out and we're like, oh, this is going to be so great. And we have like this dream in our head of this high living and this amazing life we're going to be living. And we're going to be going here, there, and everywhere. And if you're living in a downtown, you're going to be going here, there, and everywhere. But it's like, you have to park. You have to live. The cost of living is so expensive. So you have to be realistic about what's actually going to happen once you're there, because it sounds great, but those are all things you have to think through.
For sure, yes. You have to be very realistic and just even if you know somebody there or can do some Google research about, what are the costs going to be to me and how do I want to live my life? Like if you want a fun and active lifestyle, then how much do you need to be able to go out a couple times a week? What room in your budget do you need to find to be able to go bar hopping on Saturday night if that's what you choose to do?
That's right. And one of the things I can caution, because I honestly don't know if we ever got to this point or not, but it's just the idea of giving up too early. When you go and you move somewhere and you take that on, it's going to be tough. Man, is it going to be tough. Like Meg said, I mean, even thinking back on it now, it's like, I get some feelings inside about how challenging and how tough it was. But it's going to be hard. But you don't want to give up too early. You don't want to get somewhere, be there a couple months, be like, it's too hard and I'm going to go home. Because really, there's nothing wrong with that if eventually you move back. But give yourself a fair shot. Give the place a fair shot. You're coming in there, you're going to have a brand new mindset when you're looking at a new place, and you're going to have to know that some challenges are going to be there, but give yourself the time and give yourself the grace to get through it.
Yeah, I mean, like we've been saying, those first weeks are super hard no matter what, whether that's the place you're supposed to be or not. When we moved to Texas, it was hard for a while, and that wasn't where we were supposed to be. When we moved to North Carolina, it was hard for a while, and that is exactly where we're supposed to be. So just understanding that you might eventually go back home, but you have to give yourself a little bit of time to adjust and see what's really going to be the deal.
Oh boy, yes. And that's exactly what we did. When we moved, guys, to Texas, we stayed in Texas for 14 months. That was it. And you know what? We knew it wasn't right. And we had that conversation again, and we moved to North Carolina. And like Meg said, man, when we got to North Carolina, like I said, I was working at a bookstore. And it wasn't like we had these amazing jobs and these amazing things just fall in our lap. Like when you cross the border in North Carolina, people weren't just handing out jobs. It was a struggle. It was a challenge. There were times where we had in our head, well, maybe we'll go back. But looking back now, it's like I would never have thought that. And today, as I sit here, I can never see, moving back. This is home for us now.
Yeah, and just my final point on this part is just really understanding that if you do eventually decide to move back home, it doesn't mean that you failed. It means that you had an experience that you would have never had otherwise, that you've tried something new, that you've learned, that you've taken the opportunity to do something because you could. And how cool are you for just taking that leap of faith? Even if it didn't work out, that's totally cool. You just did something that most people will never do.
Ooh, yeah, fire. That is so true. And really, the overarching theme in all of this is you just have to believe in yourself. This is going to be very hard no matter what you think it might be, and no matter who you know in the place you're moving. It will still be hard. You need to know that you're strong enough to do it. I mean, we went through some stuff when we took all this on, and honestly, we had no clue what we were doing. But
we were living on love.
We were living on love. But you know what? What we did, and that worked better than anything else, we just kept going. We just kept going. We never gave up. We took the opportunities we had. We believed in ourselves. And when one of us struggled, the other of us had to pick up the slack.
You got that right. And guys, you have to just understand that there may never be a right decision on whether you should move or whether you should stay, or when to go and when not to go. But sometimes you just need to make the freaking decision and go for it. Take the leap of faith.
Preach.
If it doesn't work, like I just said, there's nothing keeping you from going back home or the last place you were or the previous place. Maybe you're going to move 17 times. I don't know. Life is all about the journey. And even though Brandon was completely against moving, I was a little iffy on it. It just opened both of our eyes to so many things that we would have never experienced had we just stayed in Goodrich, Michigan forever.
Yeah, it not only strengthened us as individuals, it strengthened us as a couple. And so if you're thinking about moving, if you are trying to take that leap of faith, do it. Just go do it, because there's only one way you'll know if it's the right decision, and that's just to go out there, do it, not worry about failing, not worry about the fear of knowing what's going to happen, because you're never going to know what's going to happen, and just go out there and get it.
And you know the cool part? These days, everyone has a smartphone, so even if you're lost in your new city, you're going to find your way back to your place.
Amen to that. We'll catch you guys next time.
See ya.
Hey B, what did you think of that episode?
I think it was pretty dang good.
Well, what should someone do if they enjoyed these last 30 minutes?
They should probably head over and leave us a review so we can reach more people.
They definitely should.
Guys, if you like the Fools in Love podcast, please go follow us over on Instagram at Fools in Love Podcast.
We'd love to connect with you and learn more about what you'd like to hear.